Hello, everyone. So glad to be back and see so many familiar faces. Those of you who have seen me talk about Venezuela, thank you for coming back. Those of you who are new to the show, well, I hope you enjoy it. Thank you, Susan and staff at the center for the invitation. I love coming to Miami.
But of course, this is your first post-Chavez talk.
True. Yes. Thank you for reminding me. All right. When the most recent news from Venezuela happened to be that interim President Maduro is being visited by birds, or they're sending checks to Chavez, dead Chavez, through balloons filled with helium, it's tempting to conclude that this is kind of a joke. And what I want to argue is that very dark moments are looming in the horizon for Venezuela, that things are looking very scary politically, and that there are big storms ahead. But at the same time, I want to argue that the United States can relax. That there's going to be perhaps this juxtaposition of I'm going to be a little bit alarmist about Venezuelan politics, but I still want to be able to say that in terms of U.S. relations with Latin America and Venezuela, things don't look so bad, and in fact, the United States could be a little bit gratified for what's going on. To make this argument, and with apologies to those who heard it last night, because it won't sound as cute if it even did last night, I want you to focus on only 3 numbers during my presentation. And that is the number 11, the number 8, and the number 6. And I'll explain those numbers. All right, the number 11. The number 11 is the margin of difference that President Chavez obtained in the October election when he was reelected before passing away. The reason why this is a very important number is because in April 14, Venezuela is going to have an election, and what's at stake there is not so much who is going to be governing Venezuela. I think we can pretty much predict that it's going to be Chavismo, but whether Chavismo is going to be able to stay in that neighborhood of 11 points. That neighborhood of 11 points, by the way, was not that significant for incumbent presidents in Latin America. On average, incumbent presidents in Latin America have managed to obtain victories of about 22%. Given how much Chavez spent to get an 11-point advantage, it's probably the most expensive electoral victory ever. But the point is, everybody's going to be watching whether Maduro is able to stay in that neighborhood, maybe even expand it. But what if that 11-point margin shrinks? And this is the real fear of Maduro. I think Maduro knows that if that advantage shrinks, there's going to be a lot of trouble because we're going to see for the first time a Chavismo after Chavez that is going to be politically insecure. A lot of the insecurities are going to be coming from within Chavismo. Chavistas are going to begin to say, you're unable to maintain this coalition. What's wrong with you? This, on top of the fact that most economists will tell you Venezuela is facing perhaps the most complicated economic scenario. The economic situation has changed dramatically from October, when Chavez was reelected, to April. Boom times to not a meltdown, but a very serious slowdown where Venezuela is going to have to enter a period of making very polemical decisions about what to do with the economy. And to face those decisions with political weakness from within is going to give us an insecure Chavismo in office, something that we haven't really seen since the early years of the Chavez administration. From 2003 until the president, we have seen a very confident Chavismo. We might easily see now a very insecure Chavismo. And this is trouble, especially because this would be the time when the government might need a certain degree of fortitude to face the economic problems ahead. So I worry there. The one interesting thing, and this is the second number I wanted you to focus, is the number 8. If things get very tough for Maduro, if he is elected president, Venezuela has in its laws 8 laws, 8 mechanisms that can easily be used by the administration to turn more authoritarian. A lot of the press has been focusing on the economic legacy of Chavez, but not enough on the institutional legal legacy. And I'm just using 8. There are many more. But let me quickly go through some of them. These are laws of the land approved legally, duly by the National Assembly to give you an idea of what would happen if a president needs to use these laws. Number 1, the Constitution bans the funding of political parties, the only democracy I know where that is the case, and by the way, that hasn't been applied to the ruling party. Number 2, the law for social responsibility, approved in 2004, essentially says that it is illegal to broadcast any news that foments anxiety in the public or disturb public order. This has been extended to the internet. In 2005, the Civil Code, this is number 3, the 2005, the Civil Code was reformed so that it is now illegal to be disrespectful of government officials. Disrespectful of government officials. The law of telecommunications says that the government can revoke media licenses if it is convenient for the interests of the nation and if public security demands it. Number 5, these aren't existing laws, but we have seen four enabling laws in Venezuela, 2 of which were approved in moments of economic hard times, but 2 were approved in economic good times. The issue is that there's now a protocol under Chavismo to grant basically full powers to the president, and Chavistas were pretty okay with that, and that could happen again. It's now a legal protocol. There is a series of laws, and this is the 6th set of laws, having to do with Ley Orgánica del Poder Popular, Ley Orgánica de Planificación Pública, Ley Orgánica de Contraloría Social, Ley Orgánica de Comunas. And what they do is they empower these community councils that are being created to have enormous prerogatives. Prerogatives that in many ways supersede the prerogatives of mayors and governors. And a lot of the energy for Chavismo now lies within these communities, which essentially are non-elected bodies assuming public official status. In 2007, Chavez wanted to give them constitutional ranking, and he failed, but he's done it through laws. The next one, number 7, this is a good one, the law for the defense of political sovereignty and national self-determination. It means that human rights defenders in Venezuela who receive international support or who sponsor speakers who talk about critical of Chavez's policies can be fined. It is illegal to receive international funding to dissent. And finally, this is the best one, the law for the partial reform of political parties bans deputies in the National Assembly from voting against the party platform. This is a law for the Chavistas. It's only 8. Think about what a wonderful institutional legacy Chavez has left Maduro, and it is very important for us to keep that in mind. What is interesting about Chavismo, even in the peak of its political power, is that these laws were not always enforced. There was a light version of authoritarianism. Some of you might think there wasn't any. Some of you might think there was a tough one. I think it was a hybrid system. But the laws are there to be used without requiring major institutional change in Venezuela. Maduro can just invoke these laws that are very rojitas, is these laws. And so I worry about this. I think that this is something that we need to keep our eyes on and make me somewhat nervous. Now, let me proceed to a little bit of the good news and why I think that the United States nonetheless shouldn't be worried too much. Those of you who know me might think might think that I am a little obsessed with Venezuela. I am not obsessed with Venezuela. This is a lot based on demand. There's a lot of interest in Venezuela, and I always find interesting things to say. But even if you think that I'm obsessed with Venezuela, okay, maybe I am. I write a lot on Venezuela. But I hope you don't mistake that position from a position that says that the United States should be equally obsessed with Venezuela. I think Chavismo has peaked in Venezuela and in Latin America. Let me talk about the next number, which was number 6. The number 6 is the summation of all the members of ALBA plus Argentina, which is the one non-ALBA member that is closely aligned with ALBA. ALBA is the alliance established by Cuba and Venezuela in the region. After all these years, after all this money spent, 6 countries, max. In a hemisphere where there are 30+ countries. They account for 10% of the Latin American economy. Not small, but certainly not globally weighty or even regionally that weighty. And here's more. Since 2008, which was the last time, that was 5 years ago, the last time that a Chavista-like president or candidate was elected, and that was Fernando Lugo in Paraguay. There have been 15 elections in Latin America. In all of them, Chavista candidates have been defeated or have had to rebrand themselves. An example of rebranding, Ollanta Humala in Peru, an example of serious defeat by somebody who is like Chavista and tried to rebrand himself but not as successfully, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who did worse in 2012 than in 2006. This is an impressive record for Latin America. About 14 to 15 elections in which Chavismo has been defeated. Chavismo is, don't get me wrong, remains strong in Venezuela, and it remains strong in ALBA countries. We heard it from Enrique, his update on Argentina, and we see re-elections there, but it seems that the wave is contained. And if I would go farther, I would say, not only is Chavismo in check, but last night we talked a little bit about this, and I was a little surprised by the discussion because it was a discussion that went in the opposite direction from what I'm about to say, and that is the demand for partnerships with the United States coming from Latin America, I don't think has been as high as it is now, perhaps even higher than it was in 1994 when there was all the excitement about the Summit of the Americas and the idea that there was going to be this convergence of members of the hemisphere. And let me say a little bit about this point. Again, this is true outside of ALBA plus A, the 6 countries, ALBA plus Argentina, which definitely are trying to create soft power by becoming anti-imperialist or showcasing their anti-imperialism. We saw the ambassador. The ambassador, if I understood what he's saying, is he wants better and more prosperous relations with the United States. Don't look at the disagreements. We want closer and closer ties with the United States in every dimension, economics, but especially security cooperation. So we see it on the part of Brazil. We absolutely see it. One of your next sessions is going to be on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is a remarkable situation occurring, an initiative from Chile encompassing Mexico, Peru in the region, an enormous association with the United States and other countries in Asia as an effort to try to demonstrate that perhaps contrary to Brazil, we are economies that are more Asia-worthy. And they want this to be done with the United States. Colombia might join, Panama might join. We see CAFTA and the Dominican and the CAFTA-DR agreements, and how great all those countries were and how not that complicated it was for those trade agreements with the United States to materialize. We see countries like Colombia interested in addressing the issue of Afro-descendants, and who are they working closely with? The U.S. Embassy in Bogota. We see it in all the regions in areas that are non-traditional ways of partnerships. And this is really, who knows if it is temporary or sustainable. I think it's a little bit sustainable, and I'll tell you why I think this is happening. There's no doubt that the region has split between perhaps three major new kids on the blocks. You have the rise of Brazil, you have a petrostate on steroids, which is Venezuela, and then you have China. At first, there was a lot of excitement that this was the end of this was the post-hegemonic world. It's the end of American dominance of the region. But I think the nations in the region have felt a little bit left behind by Brazil, a little resentful about the rise of Brazil. They have certainly been repelled by the radicalism of Venezuela and the extent to which this is a meddlesome country, not so much anymore, but used to be. But they certainly don't like this radicalism. And they are probably becoming disappointed by the fact that China really is playing very little role in helping these governments address important issues of governance. And what is the only other actor out there willing to provide some type of open arms? And that is the United States. So unlike 1994, when we tried to create closer ties between the United States and Latin America, and what we're seeing now is coming from Latin America, and it is being pushed by greater confidence in the region, but also by these geopolitical forces, these three actors that are out there, that actually are creating, in my opinion, a demand for new forms of partnerships with the United States, more mature, and in my opinion, good news. If there's something that the United States could thank about Chavismo and having peaked, is that I think that relations between the United States and Latin America, and especially in South America, are not that bad because the demand is rising. So for that reason, despite the big storm that I foresee in Venezuela and that we all should worry about because we all want to care about a country's democracy and political stability, from the point of view of the United States, Latin America relations, things look pretty good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.